What is up, boys and girls? Today I have an awesome movie for you guys, and our movie starts with Rhea and R sitting on a bench on this beautiful planet. But in a bit, a radio comes on telling R to report back to the station. You see, R is an MP, and an MP is basically a cop, and they have a lot of responsibilities. And to clarify some things about our movie here, you see this movie is set in the future, and interplanetary travel is possible, and on this planet where R lives, we see that it's inhabited by both cyborgs and human beings. But these cyborgs have an expiration date, and in 3 years, they're gonna be completely useless. And here we see this beautiful place where Rhea and R were sitting as actually some kind of glamour, a simulation that's not really real. And we see R turning off the simulation and going back to work with Rhea. And yes, that's his name, it's just the letter R. If you haven't noticed by now, something else I want to point out is that Rhea is actually a cyborg. She's not human, and R is completely in love with her. Our next scene shows Cyan, and she lives in the ghettos. She's what we call a non-citizen. The official city where R and the rest of the people live don't recognize her kind as citizens. And Cyan is a ghetto girl, and she also happens to be a prostitute and a fortune teller. The next scene takes us to R and his team embarking on their mission. This specific mission that they're going on has something to do with a rogue cyborg that broke into a medical facility looking for something that they don't know about yet. And their objectives are to infiltrate the building and kill the cyborg by the name of Cyper and his 4 other accomplices on site. This task is not going to be an easy one, as Cyper, the cyborg, is not just a regular cyborg, he's actually a combat cyborg. And combat cyborgs are really strong. Noma, the MP's boss, gives them a briefing and tells them to be really serious about the situation because it could really go sideways fast. But even though he tried to warn his own men about the dangers that they're about to face, none of them seem to care that much, especially R. As they get to their location and try to infiltrate the building through the sewers, they can all feel that something is following them. And before they noticed anything, cyborgs start coming out of the sewer waters and attack the soldiers. The soldiers panic and start shooting everywhere, and the cyborgs were incredibly precise and take out some of them. The soldiers manage to kill one of the cyborgs, but Noma, the MP's boss, is very disappointed at R because R was supposed to shoot the cyborgs right on the head to get their AI chip that actually gives them cognition power. As Noma was scolding him for being careless and not shooting the cyborg right on the head, they receive word that one of the cyborgs is inside the main deck. And so, Noma and the rest of the guys head over there, and Noma tells R to stay behind and wait for backup. But even though R was told to wait for backup, what he seemed to be interested in doing was going through the carcasses of the dead cyborgs looking for AI chips. Cause rumor has it, R is actually stealing cyborg AI chips and selling them on the black market. And as he was going through the carcasses looking for undamaged AI chips, he forgot to listen to his radio, and it was telling him that backup was going to be late and he used to rejoin the rest of the team with Noma as they're encountering heavy casualties. After an intense firefight with Noma and his team, Cyper manages to escape, and he's escaping through the tunnels heading right toward R. But before he saw him first and snapped his neck, R, who used to be a great MP, notices Cyper first and aims a gun at him. But before he could pull the trigger, Cyper was incredibly fast and they fight, and the fight ends with R getting shot on the hand, but he still manages to gun down Cyper. Next we see R with Dr. Giro, a disgraced scientist who used to work on cyborgs, who got fired because he was trying to link himself to an AI chip and make himself live forever by transferring his consciousness. R goes to his lab regularly because apparently R is trying to figure out a way to make his girlfriend Rhea live forever. And the only person who could potentially help him achieve this is Dr. Giro. When we move on to our next scene, we see how Noma, the leader of the MPs, is really concerned about what Cyper was doing in that medical facility. And going through the scans and searches that he made at the lab, they find out that he was looking up information about human DNA. Then we see the very concerned Noma telling his analyst to look for more information about what Cyper was looking for in the facility. And after he told her that and gave her his coffee, he leaves. On our next scene, we see R going to his favorite place to grab some noodles and some drinks. As he was sitting there, Cyan notices him and she asks to read his fortune. He teases her by pretending to partake in her fortune telling and taking her fortune sticks and using them as chopsticks. Seeing that he's not interested in her fortunes or her, she gets mad and decides to leave. And next we see R going to a club. And here we understand that Rhea, the girl that he is in love with, is actually a cyborg that was built to dance. And he's there at the club to talk to the club owner about purchasing Rhea. As the two were there discussing the possibility of purchase, Rhea stumbles and falls. This has never really happened to her, and it happened now because she's about to expire and some of her motor functions are not working properly. Seeing that she's done for and can't really work at the club anymore, the owner doesn't mind giving her to R. Plus, in exchange for Rhea, R promises to do some illegal paperwork for the club owner. Our next scene takes us to a bunch of scavengers who found the body of Cyper. What these scavengers basically do is find a bunch of dumped bodies on the ghettos and replace their AI chips with those bought on the black market. And this way, if the cyborgs that they can patch up are functional, they can sell them to the highest bidder. But little did they know, Cyper is a terrorist combat cyborg, and as soon as he wakes up, he kills both of the people in the room. The next day, R goes to see Dr. Giro again, and this time, Dr. Giro has something very interesting for R. After a lot of extensive research into cyborg technology, Dr. Giro discovered that he can keep Rhea alive through another human being that has the same DNA. Plus, the best thing is, Dr. Giro has located the perfect host, and that host is apparently Cyan, the same girl who happens to be a prostitute and a fortune teller that's been bugging R at that bar just a few days ago. And so, R goes around town from ghetto to ghetto, showing people Cyan's photo, asking if they know where she lives. And after a lot of searching, a little boy approaches him and tells him that he knows where she is. And even though the little boy takes him to her house, she wasn't really there, and the little boy knew that she wouldn't be. He just took him there to get some money out of him, and the little boy is actually Cyan's friend. But at night, as the little boy was telling Cyan that an MP was looking for her, R was apparently tracking down the boy and he finds Cyan with him. By making her think that he requires some prostitution services, he takes her to Dr. Giro's lab. But at the lab, before they can run their experiments, Noma gets there with some of his MPs and arrests Dr. Giro. As Dr. Giro gets sent to prison, R gets punished by the big boss who actually wanted to fire him, but Noma, his boss, really likes him and knows that he's a great soldier. But R has lost his faith in humanity because the love of his life is a cyborg and she's about to expire very soon. And his challenges and punishment doesn't end there. When he gets home, he finds Rhea looking really sad. Apparently, her programming to be a dancing cyborg has really taken its toll and she can't be inside a house not doing anything, she needs to go out and dance. But when R goes back to the club and asks the owner to let Rhea dance for him that night, the owner says no, stating that she's lost most of her functions and he doesn't need that kind of cyborg around his club. And so, the very angry R starts a fight inside the club and he manages to knock out all of the bouncers at the nightclub. And just before he was about to cave in the owner's head with a chair, the owner gives in and agrees to let Rhea dance at his club. After leaving the club, R is feeling really sad about how Rhea is about to expire in just a few days. And as he was riding his bike, he decides to drive through the ghettos and he smashes into Cyan's home, creating a big gaping hole in the middle of her house. On the next day, R gets a visit from Cyan and she has a pistol with her. And Cyan didn't really appreciate what R did to her house and she's there to demand for compensation. R seems unfazed, even when she tries to shoot at him, and he tells her that he doesn't have any money now and she can live with him until he can get the cash. After 2 or 3 days, Cyan couldn't stand living in that house, and she also couldn't stand to live with Rhea, who's a cyborg, who's usually just quiet and sad about something, and so she decides to leave. But R tracks her down and tells her to meet him the next day, and by then he'll have the money that he owes her. He also visits Dr. Giro in prison and tells him that he's gonna break him out in 2 days and gives him some money. And as he was giving him the last amount of money he owned, he makes him promise to actually get it right this time,
because if they don't get it right this time, he promises him that they will both die. The next day, things get a little intense as Cyper, the terrorist combat cyborg, now has his own cyborg partner, and together, for some reason, they both attempt to kidnap Cyan. Noma really did his research and he knew this attack would happen, and so he was there with his troops waiting for Cyper. As you can guess, a huge firefight breaks out, a lot of men lose their lives, but Cyper and his partner manage to escape. On top of that, one of the men throws a smoke grenade, and before anybody could notice, that same person kidnapped Cyan. And in a bit, we learn that it was R who threw the grenade and took her. At the crime scene, something gnaws at Noma, and he starts to wonder why a cyborg like Cyper would be interested in somebody like Cyan. And so he gets on a call with his analyst and makes her compare a bunch of DNA samples. He makes her compare Dr. Giro's DNA with Cyan's DNA and also with Cyper's DNA. After the analysis was over, we learned that these three people share a DNA sequence. This basically means that one of them can embed their own consciousness and memories into the other. As soon as Noma figures this out, he also learns that Dr. Giro is not actually human but a cyborg. So he quickly makes his way to the prison and shoots Dr. Giro as he was walking out with R. There, he tells R that he's been duped and that Dr. Giro transferred his consciousness into Cyper long ago, and the Dr. Giro that R knew was actually just some cyborg. Realizing that he's been used and that there's no way to save Rhea, R loses hope and just cries in some alley. His original dream was to save Rhea and take her on this vacation to another planet, but now he finally comes to terms with the fact that that may be impossible. Our next scene takes us to a transport vehicle where Cyper and his partner try to break into a medical facility. And as Noma was driving there, before he got to the facility, he calls R and begs him to come on this mission because he really needs his help. And Cyper not only has his partner with him, but he's also kidnapped Cyan and he's taken her to the facility. And his plan is to transfer his consciousness to her body before his body expires. But before he could begin the operation, he gets to the main deck, seals off all the exits, and makes the doctors program all the combat cyborgs to target MPs. Because of this, as soon as Noma and his troops got there, it was a massacre. Most of Noma's men die, and Cyper, who's actually Dr. Giro, activates the self-destructive sequence of the lab. With only a few men left, seeing that the self-destruct option has been enabled, Noma orders everybody to evacuate and stays behind to save whoever he could. And Cyper tries to transfer his consciousness into Cyan. But the entire lab was going haywire and the operation prematurely fails. On the last sequence, we witness Noma taking out a bunch of cyborgs single-handedly. And after he took out like 5 or 6 of them, he gets really overwhelmed, and as one of the cyborgs was about to kill him, R gets there in time and takes them out. After saving Noma, even though he was badly injured, R makes his way to the main deck. There, he has a final fight with Dr. Giro inside of Cyper's body. And after an intense hand-to-hand combat, just when it almost looked like Cyper was about to prevail, Noma comes to R's rescue and throws a bomb at Cyper. In the process, Cyper manages to stab Noma, and the explosion injures R severely. But he still manages to get Cyan, who's still alive, to an elevator, and he makes her promise to take care of Rhea as she has nobody else. And then he walks back to the main deck's corridor, lies there, and dies in the explosion. And the movie ends with Cyan finding Rhea dead because she expired as well, and she buries Rhea's AI chip along with a photo of her and R, symbolizing how they lived and died together. And that is how this awesome Korean movie comes to an end. I really enjoyed watching this for you guys. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel. I love you guys so much and I hope to see you on my next recap. Bye.